Status quo, by definition, it means the existing state of affairs or the current conditions of your life. Recent software, internet, and mobile phone outages have briefly challenged the status quo for many Americans. What would happen if you woke up tomorrow and your status quo had changed long term? What if your electricity went out for weeks? How about if your debit or credit cards no longer worked? What if the internet went down for an extended period of time? These are just a few scenarios that would change the way Americans do life in a moment's notice. How do we prepare for the chaos that continues to knock at our door? Join me as we explore this and more on this episode of the Field Journal Podcast.
Navigate these uncharted times of chaos and confusion with the Field Journal Podcast, where each episode we decipher the events unfolding all around us with the steadfast truth of the kingdom story. Together, we'll focus on developing an eternal perspective so we can have peace and hope despite our circumstances. Now here's your guide, Kirk Buckner.
Welcome to the Field Journal Podcast, where we observe the world through the lens of the kingdom story so we can have clarity, peace, and hope in these unprecedented times. Status quo. In Latin, the phrase means the state in which. The phrase has been adopted into the English language to describe the current situation, especially in context of social, political, or economic conditions. In essence, we are talking about the way things are in your life and mine. Recent events should challenge us to think about changes to our status quo and how prepared we are to take them on. The assassination attempt on Donald Trump, software outages, power outages, mobile service outages are a few examples of changes that could affect our lives. If you think about it, most Americans live their life in the status quo bubble. Our lives are pretty routine in a rotation of work, family, social life, recreation, and then repeat. Occasionally, things disrupt our routine, but most of the time we snap right back into it. But what if something occurred where we couldn't snap back into our routine? How prepared are we as a people? This is not an episode on prepping, like with bug-out bags and food rations and caves and ammunition. I am more concerned about our hearts and minds being prepared. Here are some questions that we should consider. What if there was a warning that perilous times were ahead? Would you listen? What would convince you? Who could convince you? Bottom line, would you want someone to tell you what to watch for? Someone you can trust? Someone that has your best interest in mind? I would. The question then becomes, who would you trust? Who would you listen to? What person or persons in your life could deliver such a warning that you would consider what was being said and then prepare for the trouble ahead? Well, almost 2,000 years ago, 4 fishermen had a concern that their status quo was about to change in a major way. And they asked the one person who they trusted to provide them with the answers. Let's go back to that time. Jesus and his disciples are in the temple area and are about to leave after a long day and head to the Mount of Olives for the evening. As they are leaving, his disciples came up to point out how magnificent the temple was and how impressive the stone walls were. You see, the temple was at the center of life for the Jewish people. It was the center of their relationship with God. Out of all the problems they had with Roman occupation and their lack of freedom, the temple was their source of pride and hope. But Jesus says something that shakes them. He said to them, "Do you see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." That's Matthew 24, 1-2. This was shocking for his disciples to hear, and clearly the destruction of the temple would be a major status quo change, a status quo change at the highest level. Historically, this had happened to the Jewish people before. Their first temple, built by King Solomon, was destroyed in 586 BC when the Babylonians captured Jerusalem, torched it, and exiled many of the people to Babylon. This is all recorded in 2 Kings chapter 25. So you can imagine how disturbing this prophetic warning from Jesus is for his disciples. about how not one stone of the temple and its surrounding buildings will be left standing. And, as they often do when they are confused, they ask Jesus to clarify, to help them in their confusion. Listen to this. As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" And Jesus answered and said to them, "See to it that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will mislead many. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for these things must take place, but that is not yet the end. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. Then they will deliver you to tribulation, and will kill you, and you will be hated by all the nations because of my name." That's Matthew 24, 3-9. Jesus warns about a time of tribulation, a time of trouble. And he will provide his disciples with even a greater warning. Listen to this. "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will." That's Matthew 24, 15 and 21. Jesus is warning of great troubled times, and he's giving a clue for when it will really start. Yes, there will be wars and rumors of wars. There'll be nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There'll be pestilence and famine and earthquakes, times of great birth pains. We think about a woman who is going to give birth. She has pains that are indicators that the birth is coming soon, and it increases in intensity and frequency. And Jesus is saying the same thing. There will be things that will happen on the earth that will help us know and understand that that time is drawing near. But the thing, the big thing, will be what Daniel the prophet said. And here's what Daniel the prophet said. We can find this in Daniel 9:27. "And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations, one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate." Again, that's Daniel 9:27. Daniel received this prophetic vision of someone who we now call the Antichrist, who will, in Jerusalem, go to the temple or whatever structure it is that is built to worship God, and he will desecrate it. It will be an abomination to God. And the angel Gabriel told this to Daniel that this would happen. It is biblical prophecy, and Jesus is referring back to this prophecy. And he is warning his disciples that when this happens, this abomination of desolation that Daniel the prophet talked about, then you will know that it'll be a time of great trouble. And again, before that, we're just going to have things that are going to happen in the world that are not of the status quo. It'll be a time of chaos. Things will be confusing. Things will not be status quo. Things will change for the way mankind lives. Now, Jesus answered their questions. He answered those questions of what will be the signs of your coming and the end of the age. They were important questions to ask because the disciples were not just asking for themselves, they were asking for us, for those who are alive today. Why? Because Jesus has not returned and the next age has not started, so the warnings from Jesus are in the prophetic future. Things for the people alive today to look for. The question becomes, are we watching? Will you be one of the people who is ready? And there are people who are ready. Listen to what the Apostle John recorded in the book of Revelation. "After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could count, from every nation and all the tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. That's Revelation 7, 9-10. John sees all of these people, and he doesn't understand who they are or where they came from. So he asks an elder in heaven, and this is what it says. Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, These who are clothed, who are in white robes, who are they, and where have they come from? And I said to him, My Lord, you know. And he said to me, These are the ones who came out of the great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. That's Revelation 7, 13-14. These that are clothed in white robes are from all over the earth, from every tribe and nation and tongue and people. And they were ones who were prepared for the time Jesus warned us about. The bottom line question becomes then, will you be one of those? How prepared are you? Now, I want to end with this because I think this is the question for us to ponder. But it really strikes me as we're sitting here in this time and age and we see all these things that are going on around us. If we're really looking at them, we would notice that it's a time that's different. It's a time that's different historically. There are more things that are unstable about our life than that are stable. We'll talk about this in an upcoming episode. We have to really ask, what is our hope in? What do we trust in? Who do we trust to give us the truth, especially about what lies ahead for us? I want you to ponder this to challenge your heart and mind and move you out of the distracted world and get you to think about where we are as a people. Here's the question. How prepared are you for the time ahead? I want to thank you for joining me on this episode. Until next time, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.
Thank you for being a part of this episode of the Field Journal Podcast, a production of Truth of the Kingdom. And while we've reached the end of our journey today, the conversation continues at truthofthekingdom.com. Until next time, may the Kingdom story be your source of truth and hope, no matter what's happening around you.